Wow.
Ready?
Hi, welcome to our mukbang. It's called My Dad is My Sugar Daddy.
In all caps.
Very important.
I'm Crystal Zhao. We're all students at UW-Madison.
I'm Maya Parker.
And I'm Sam Starks.
And we're sitting here doing a Chinese food mukbang and talking about our feelings as Asian people.
Yep.
Alright, should we tell them what we're eating?
Sure. Yeah.
A little tour.
A little tour of our table. I got the... What did I get?
V5.
I got some V5, a classic Chinese restaurant.
Oh, shout out to A8 China.
Not sponsored.
Not
Not
sponsored
sponsored,
with
but
it
you
for the
could.
food. Yes. I got some tofu, I think. Question mark.
I got coconut shrimp curry with white rice and house lo mein.
Wow.
I got the $4.99 General Tso's special,
Beautiful.
along with pork lo mein. And then we also got some Chinese donuts and crab rangoon.
Yeah. And we also have fortune cookies with questions on the inside,
Yeah.
so we can answer them
Yeah,
and
so
tell you about our future.
Coconut twist.
Yeah.
Yes, we love that.
And free sodas.
Yeah. just putting this out there, they gave us like 8 forks because they thought like 8 people would be eating all this
Nope,
food. But
just
it was
the 3 of
all
us.
3 of
We
us.
start with a question.
Sure. We need to whip out.
I'm gonna start eating.
Okay, let's start eating while I'm popping. So we have a relationship jar, we have a model minority jar, and then we have
Oh.
a beauty standard
I
and
love
interpersonal
I
relationship jar.
see.
Start with our first question.
We can dump this.
Yeah.
Which one did you get? This one?
Oh, this is a real fortune. Okay. Oh, this is a double loaded.
Double loaded
Yeah.
question.
Okay, does being model minority mean we're more comfortable with white people as Asian Americans? I guess I can start with that. So just a little bit history and background. So all 3 of us grew up in predominantly white communities, and we all went to high school, or like our education has been very focused on white history as well as the predominantly white culture in the United States. So I think as the idea of model minority really extends to our college careers, I definitely feel like we're more comfortable with white people in some spaces, especially at UW-Madison, which is also a predominantly white institution.
Yeah, and then like what Crystal was saying, like all of us grew up in predominantly white cultures and stuff, and like the towns we grew up in, and I'm also adopted into a white family, so like I definitely feel like I'm more comfortable around white people. And then for like one of the reasons why I came to Madison, I was deciding between here and UW, University of Washington, Seattle. And the 1/4 of the population there is Asian international students. And when I went to go visit, my parents had mentioned that to me. I didn't really think much of it, but when I was walking around, it affected me a lot more than what I thought it was going to. And then like, I hate to say it, but like I knew Madison was gonna be, I thought it was gonna be a little bit more comfortable just because it wasn't as diverse, and I wouldn't be around as many other Asian people, which I haven't grown up being used to. But it has affected me in a lot of different ways that I also didn't expect.
Yeah, I mean, I did grow up in a couple communities that actually had a large population of people of color, including the Asian community. But because I'm also adopted and have been raised by a white family, I definitely feel like I'm more assimilated into white culture, and that's my comfort zone, because being on campus, there is a population of international students, and like 50% of them are from mainland China. And when I am like around them, I notice that I feel out of place with them, and I just don't feel like I belong, even though I'm also Asian. So I find myself gravitating more towards circles of like white friends and such.
Going off what Maya was speaking about, I'm actually technically international because I still have Chinese passport. But going to a really white high school, I definitely feel like I was trying so hard to assimilate, and now coming back to Madison where there are more international students, I still find it super hard to like talk to them or like fit into the community because it was so segregated from what the culture is when I was growing up. So I definitely agree that being in a predominantly white institution in a way gives us some comfort in the sense that we're comfortable with the people we're talking to and we know how to be Asian American in this space in particular.
But then at the same time, I guess I would say it still feels a little, at least for me, I still feel a little bit out of place in my groups of white friends and such.
For sure.
Because and this connects into the question we pulled from before, but I feel like there's a lot of,
We can pull that question!
Are we pulling it now? Okay.
We can pull it out now whenever you want to.
Well, I'll just, because I feel like a lot of people still, even if it's subconscious, they kind of look at Asian people as exotic, and I don't know, it just makes me feel weird, and I always question how much they like me for me or me for my Asianness or don't like me for my Asianness.
I question people's intentions and how they perceive me. There's only so much you can do as a person to try it, like represent like who you want to be seen as and like stuff like that. And like obviously like there's a lot of things that you can't change about yourself. Being Asian.
Can't change that. Yeah. Do you guys think do you think it would be different if we went to school like in California, one of the state schools that's like 70% Asian? Do you think that would change how we date and our relationships?
Yeah, I think it would be different. I think I would have a totally different experience. It's really interesting to me because growing up with a white family, I haven't really done much to like kind of explore, like understand like what my race means and what it means to me specifically. I have a friend who's also adopted that I grew up in the same town as me. I went to high school with her. It's really interesting. She goes to school in San Diego, and like her way of like going about of like exploring what her race means to her has been a lot different than mine. Like she right off the bat joined like a Pacific Islander Filipino dance group and stuff like that, and really like immersed herself in with other people who were Asian, where like my way about doing that, I really haven't done that, and like doing this class, doing this project is kind of like my first step to like figuring that out for myself.
UC Berkeley, 1968, the term Asian American was formed as a political action inspired by the Black Power movement, but since then it's been used as an umbrella term diminishing us to stereotypes. Throughout my life, I never felt a need to know what my race means to me as a person because I was just another Asian American. Today, after this class, which has been my first steps to uncovering this, I realized my ability to do that was often taken away from me because of assumptions. I am slowly learning how I want to take this term back for myself.
I definitely agree. I actually grew up for a good chunk of my life in California, so and my community had a decently large Asian population, and especially because I was in Davis, California, which has the UC Davis campus. And I think because at UW, I've been kind of wondering, okay, should I join some Asian culture groups, organizations? Should I do that? Because I would like to explore my identity more from a racial and ethnic standpoint. But because I'm surrounded by so many white people here, I still question that a lot, but I think I would be less nervous to do that if I was surrounded by like 70% Asians.
Do you, either of you, like, feel like the whole like Greek life like affecting like how you feel about yourself and like look and stuff and like social interactions and just like what's expected of somebody who goes to Madison? Because that's something that like affects me a lot and that I think about a lot, just because I feel like it's such a big part of the culture here. Where like when I was looking or like thinking about going to college, I never thought I would go to like a big school like this or like be involved with Greek life or like somewhere where it was like really important. Or it seems like it is, and I don't know, I was just wondering.
Yeah, I definitely think it does. So I'm part of a multicultural Greek community. I definitely think the way we interact is a lot of times based on what the PHA and PHC, which are the white fraternity and sororities, act. So I definitely think there's I think maybe like 50% of campus are part of Greek life, so it's a large population. And Greek life, I think a lot of times tend to have this specific like beauty standard about like what people are supposed to look like, especially like during their rush week. You can see like so many people are blonde, they're like fit into like the top petite beauty standards. So I definitely think that affects how I dress in so many ways, because when I'm back home I dress very different than what I do when I'm here.
Really? Like, can you give us an example?
I think I dress more like preppy when I'm here.
Okay, interesting.
Like I wear a lot more skirts. I do like leggings and sweatshirt, which I don't do back home. So I definitely think like a part of me really want to assimilate into like the culture here, because I feel like walking on the street as Asian, a lot of people assume like, oh, you're not from here, you're international. So like sometimes I overcompensate by like dressing super white and super preppy, just to like let people know like, hey, I'm from here.
It kind of goes along with like the idea that we've talked about in class about how like being the model minority, we have to really show that we're patriotic, like putting a flag outside of like Asian like stores or like houses and stuff. So like that's kind of like parallel to like us being here and like beauty standards and stuff like that.
When we talked about the flags in front of Asian American household during World War II, we're talking about the idea of national objection by Karen Shimakawa. It talks about how Asian Americans so badly want to reject the idea that we're foreign or we're invaders to the United States, so we have to perform extra hard to prove that we're American, just like everybody else in this country. So we just wanted to explain a little bit more.
Yeah, I definitely feel that with the beauty standards for Greek life, because I see a lot of girls posting on Instagram from, you know, their sororities and stuff, and I just feel such a disconnect between myself and what I see and who I see in those pictures. I feel like I don't fit into that beauty standard in any way, which makes me feel more alienated as an Asian person, because and it also probably ties into my gender expression and gender identity and things like that, because actually lately I've been leaning on the side of thinking I'm like non-binary, and so I've been dressing more androgynously lately, especially since cutting my hair, and so it definitely makes me feel like weird when I find myself surrounded by all the tall, petite, like blonde, white girls from sororities and stuff, and then it makes me feel like, am I desirable enough as an Asian person if I don't fit that beauty standard and fitting the model minority and everything?
Yeah, I feel that too. I feel like I'm kind of at this place where like I know I don't want to be grouped as part of that. I don't want to be like that. I feel like I'm like how I like to dress and like my style and stuff. I think I pretty much like, not pretty much, like I kind of have an idea of like that and how I want to present myself, and I feel confident in that. But like there's also a disconnect. Like I feel confident in myself in the way, but I don't feel confident in the way others perceive me, because there's still that like in the back, I think they're in the back of their head like, oh, she's Asian, or like, oh, she's not a typical sorority girl, or something like that. And like that's really hard to like know that I'm like at a place where I'm pretty like satisfied with myself, but not with like how others like see me. I think that's kind of important to like know and think about and stuff. But
yeah, I definitely relate to that, because I feel internally more comfortable with myself, especially since I've been kind of exploring my gender identity and my gender expression and my haircut and everything. I feel more like myself, but also a little more insecure about what other people think of me. Yeah. And I've noticed that I still concern myself over whether or not cis, straight, white men would find me attractive looking like this, when it's like, I don't even know how attracted I am.
I mean, we are stuck in the Midwest. That's all.
Yeah,
in Wisconsin. I'm just gonna put that out there. Nothing more than that, but it's just
yeah. And I constantly question when it comes to dating and such, if things don't work out, one of the first things subconsciously I wonder is it because I'm Asian, or have they found someone who's white and that feels more comfortable for them? Because when I picture them with someone who's white, I feel inferior. And
like a second choice.
Yeah.
Or something, or like maybe like a second thought, or be like, oh, I mean, I guess she's like pretty attractive for an Asian.
Yeah,
something like that.
Definitely.
So I mentioned that when it comes to dating and relationships, I kind of feel inferior or like a second choice when I see someone choose a white person over me, or they move on to a white person after seeing me. And I want to tie that into the music video called Your Best American Girl by Mitski, because the music video shows Mitski, an Asian American, having this interest in a guy, and the guy flirts back and is really interested too, and out of nowhere a white woman comes around, and all of a sudden he's no longer interested in Mitski, and he starts making out with and flirting with this white woman instead, and Mitski's just sitting there watching it all happen, and she feels really lonely and insecure in her Asian identity because she thinks that her Asianness is less appealing than whiteness.
Yeah.
You know, especially if like I'm going on dates with a girl who looks straight passing and nobody would, and I know like we shouldn't stereotype and stuff, but the girls who fit that like stereotypical sorority beauty
Nothing
standard
against
form,
them either.
yeah. So if I'm like going on dates with a girl who fits more of the sorority look, I start feeling insecure in myself and wondering if she'll like move on and find someone who looks more like her.
Wow, that one question really snowballed.
Yeah.
Okay, should we do another question?
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to pull?
I'll pull one. I need to vacuum again after this. Okay. What is your personal relationship with material things like clothes?
I wrote about this in like one of my discussion posts earlier in our class. By the way, our class is Asian American Special Topics, Feelings, Queer, and Asian. If you didn't like already kind of pick up on that, that's like the title. Okay, anywho, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, the question. So like one of the, like how I was talking about how I have like a lot of like, don't have a lot of trust in how like others perceive me. I've always kind of I remember growing up, my mom always told me like, oh, when you go to school, you should dress nice just so that it shows respect and stuff like that. And then I also remember in like high school, like one of like a super nerdy kid, love him. He was like hilarious. Everybody kind of shitted on him a little bit, but like I appreciated him a lot. He like asked me, he was like, Sam, why do you care how you look? And it was like, oh, I just like, my mom told me like, I like, it's just is respectful and it makes me feel good, and I do a lot, like I work harder and stuff like that. But like now after thinking about it, I think it was just me like trying to compensate for like being Asian, I guess, and trying to make up for how people might perceive me. So like my idea was like, if I can project myself so obviously with like how I dressed, how I like wore my hair and stuff like that, like maybe they'll see past like my race, and then they'll actually see like who I am and who I want to be.
Yeah, I feel like especially in high school, like the perception of Asian Americans are like, oh, they're nerdy, they're geeks. So I feel like dressing well is especially important so you don't fit into that stereotype and like become part of the model minority myth where like everybody sees you as this very monolith idea of Asian American.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in elementary school, I actually only wore gym shorts and baggy t-shirts and such, and that's just what made me feel comfortable, and my mom didn't like complain about it. She was totally fine with me shopping only in the guys section. But once I hit middle school, and nobody told me to do this, my mom didn't tell me to do this, but I decided myself that I needed to go out and buy a whole new wardrobe of more feminine, like traditionally feminine clothes, because I was afraid that I would be bullied in middle school if I didn't dress like the traditional white beauty standard. And I just kind of stuck with that all the way throughout middle school and high school, but I think I've started feeling more comfortable in actually dressing the way that I like, with more androgynous clothes and stuff, and I'm learning to be more confident myself despite what others may or may not think about me. And I guess we could tie a lot of our like beauty standard talk and things about relationships and stuff, and trying to fit like the white standard. It fits in with Lauren Berlant's cruel optimism. Cruel optimism. Y'all want to speak on that?
So it kind of goes off of like the affect theory, which basically means, I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but my understanding is that like people, our relationships, people, objects, ideas, things, like we have certain feelings attached to them, and like those feelings affect how we go about in our life. And like a lot of the time, like there's so many of these like attachments that we have is actually stopping us from like reaching our potential, or like thinking of something beyond like what we have or what we can even imagine. So it's actually really crippling to us. But then also having these attachments, like we think we can get there, but we really can't. So like that's the cruel optimism.
The idea that we desire something or want to have a good attachment with something, but that desire to have that good attachment with something, whether it's a relationship, a job, good whatever, an object, if there's something you want that's actually like stopping you from reaching like actual happiness, then that is the cruel optimism. So for example, tying into our talk about beauty standards and relationships and stuff, as you know, a model minority, we try to fit that model minority standard because a lot of Asians subconsciously are hoping that we'll be given like a seat at the table with white people, you know, but in reality we're never gonna be treated fairly and equitably relative to white people, and so that attempt to fit in with white people is actually crippling us.
Yeah, I also think, I guess it's not possible to achieve equity at some point in society, but also if we keep trying to fit into the standards they're giving us, which is like a secondhand whatever, a table at the sea but with no voice, I think when we try to fit into the standard, that's more cruel optimism, because that doesn't really get us to our end goal, which is to achieve equity. But we think these short-term changes will make us happier, and in the end, because we're so nice to them, then like they'll accept us or like give us voices, but that's not how it works.
We're actually crippling ourselves.
Exactly.
I mean,
That's what they want.
And in the process, it's also pitting us against other communities of color.
Exactly.
Because I forget who this was by, but I think it was in that podcast we listened to this past week.
By Freedom Inc.
Yeah, they were talking about how, you know, Asians are trying to get that seat at the table with white people without realizing that that table was built by slaves, and we don't acknowledge that. And so then Black voices and Black stories feel left out by Asians because it seems as though we're trying to put them down to get ourselves ahead.
I would like to add this excerpt from Racial Melancholia by David Ain and Shin-Hee Han, because I think it's useful in describing how Asian Americans feel with knowing that we are not the most oppressed in this additional racial hierarchy that's made among people of color, and that we have a potential seat at the table, but we'll also never be white. Melancholia describes an unresolved process that might usefully describe the compromise, immigration, and assimilation of Asian Americans into the national fabric. The suspended assimilation, the inability to blend into the American melting pot, suggests that for Asian Americans, ideals of whiteness are perpetually strained, continually estranged. They remain at an unattainable distance, at once a compelling fantasy and a lost ideal.
I think it's also important to clarify that like model minority came about because like the U.S. is an empire, like they imperialized Asian countries, and then they picked and choose only the top Asians to bring over here, which created the model minority. And then like they were able to say like, oh look, we have this other race here, and they're doing so well, when like those Asians that they brought over were already doctors and lawyers and like people like that. So
and I guess like smaller scale ways you can apply cruel optimism to your life, for example, is if you're talking to someone and you're really interested and then things fall off, sometimes you might think, oh, I still wanna be following them on Instagram or have them on Snapchat and stuff because you're secretly hoping that they're gonna eventually talk to you, but
even though the relationship wasn't healthy in the first place, you still
yeah, or
want
something
that.
like that, or you just know it'd be better for you to move on whether or not it went well.
Yeah.
And so you're still hanging on to that hope, and that's what you desire, but wanting them back or wanting them to talk to you is actually what's preventing you from like thriving in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember it was a quote from class. I think our professor said it. I don't remember the words exactly, but like living in the area where like with our cruel optimism and like trying to live up to like these standards and stuff like that, and our like we have our attachments, we're living from like 0 to like trying to survive. And then like once we let go of those attachments, then we're like can begin to flourish, and that's like living from like 1 to infinity. And I think this kind of ties into the idea of like the good life as well. And like the like which is the stereotypical like straight timeline that like everybody thinks that we have to be on. And like once we get past that 0 to 1 part of surviving and we get to the 1 to like infinity of flourishing, like then we can think of something like beyond of like what we can even imagine or like what we know and stuff, and like how do we get there is like the big question here.
I think it's so hard for people to like give up what they already have, even though what they have is like 0.5 and they want 100.
Yeah.
But it's so hard for them to like give up the 0.5 in order to achieve 100. So I definitely think the good life is such a hard complex to escape.
When you guys think of the good life in the US, what do you think?
No student loans.
Yeah, no student.
Cancel
I
student loans
mean the
2020.
good life as in what the standards
Yeah.
they have for us.
I mean, like a
are.
house, a family.
Getting an education, going to school,
Yeah.
being financially independent, and like getting a house,
yeah,
having kids.
Heteronormativity.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And you have to meet all of these benchmarks, or like you have
At
to
a
meet all
certain
of these
time.
events, like
Yeah.
at benchmarks at a certain time of your life.
I remember we talked about this in class. Part of the good life, it seems, in America is having a life that is enviable.
Yeah.
Something, for example, that you're able to post on like Instagram or whatever, and people are like, wow, I want that. That's so cool. Because somehow people feel less satisfied with their lives if other people don't want it.
That's a good point, yeah.
So having the time to travel and stuff like that, and go to, I don't know, concerts and sports games and all that kind of stuff while still having that job, having that house, and being productive in your career.
Yeah, I think there's also another, like, totally the other side of the pendulum of, like, the good life is, like, not having to have attachments, being, like, totally independent, not having to worry about other people or, like, worry about people worrying about you, and just, like, being, like, totally free and just, like, enjoying what the world has to offer and stuff. And, like, I think that's also could be a good life, but also, like, there's setbacks and, like, pros and cons to, like, each of those, like, different sides. So I'm not sure if, like, the one where we, like, the good life that we think of or, like, that we try to imagine when we're flourishing, if that's gonna be, like, in between, or if it's gonna be totally outside of the pendulum and stuff like that. And, like, I can't even think about, like, what that would be.
Analogy time. Okay, the human eye can only see a small spectrum of color, but we know that there are other colors out there. We just don't have the capacity or the ability to even imagine what those would be. This is parallel to trying to think of a life beyond the good life, where we lose our attachments and truly flourish. And as what Lauren Berlant would ask, how could we use this for political action?
I think it's also very generational, because I think our generation as like Gen Z or whatever we are.
One of the XYZs.
One of the XYZs. I feel like our expectation for life is so different because of social media.
Yeah.
Like the things we're able to post and brag about are very different from like what our parents' generation went through. So like the idea of having a house and getting married are still the good life, but like now like traveling, exploring, like even
Getting paid to travel.
Exactly.
Getting paid to, like,
Make mukbang videos.
yeah.
yeah. I feel like
I mean,
those
like,
things-
if you guys want, if y'all want to, like, blow us up or something,
wow, we would love that. We will love that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll do, like, travel vlogs, and then we'll do exactly what we say we shouldn't be doing.
Yes.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Do we want to crack open another question?
Another one. Can someone eat the fortune cookies?
Oh my god.
Cracked open on the table.
Wow.
Okay.
I can eat it.
Okay.
As I'm working my
Everybody
way.
take one. You can get the factory fortune as well.
All right.
Look at that.
Oh wait, hang on. Here's the fortune. A bold and dashing adventure is in your future.
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
Wow. Mine says, a cheerful letter or message is on its way to you.
Oh wait, this is a different question. This is a new question.
Oh, that's a new question?
Yeah.
Oh, let's do the question then.
Okay. What is solidarity? What does it feel like? What's the difference between unity, friendship, and love? And this also kind of ties in with like us being a minority, but not being the most oppressed with being minority. Wow, I just said that like
It's okay. We can have subtitles.
you know what I'm trying to say. But also with being like an ally and stuff. Okay.
Yeah. I think solidarity is really different for Asian Americans, especially in the Midwest, because I think we're never like big enough to be like an important group within the
Yeah.
BIPOC community, but at the same time we exist and then people know that we exist. So it's just weird idea that like we aren't really oppressed by like police brutality or like the prison system, especially like East Asians, while like the Black and brown folks are really struggling in that area. So like how can we become allies without feeling like we're also like the white saviors, we're saving them from police brutality? So like supporting Black, Indigenous, and brown organizers while now taking over is something I really struggle with.
Yeah. I also struggle with that too, and like being able to like, what does being Asian actually really mean then, or like what does it mean in the mix of like all of the other racial injustice and like violence going on? It's something that like I like recently just moved to Minneapolis and I live downtown, and it was like home with my mom during the protests and stuff like that, and it was very, very weird for me to be sitting in my house with my mom, like, and to just feel like totally like in a white bubble, because like where I live was like a lot of other white people, and right downtown and stuff like that, and like trying to figure out, like, I realized that I grew up privileged and that I grew up with like a white family and stuff like that, but I also realized like there's a lot of things that I'm like struggling with being Asian. So how am I able to like mourn that while also helping others and just being aware of like everything I say and do and stuff like that, when sometimes like I just need to cry.
Yeah. I also live in the Twin Cities, and I live in St. Paul, and I live in the neighborhood that was hit the hardest by the protests and all the lootings and stuff like that. And while I totally, it's a very mixed bag, because with the protests and the lootings and all that, people like to believe that it was all just one group doing one thing, one group doing another, but it was so many different people, and it's a very complicated relationship that I think people have a hard time fully seeing the bigger picture. And so, you know, I recognized that there were a lot of different people participating in the protests, a lot of different people choosing to loot buildings and set things on fire, and like, I know some of them were from the Black community, and I have to try to work to understand where they're coming from and what they might be feeling and how I could be there for them. But it was also hard because my neighborhood that I live in serves a very large community of Black people and other people of color, and a lot of the businesses and stores that were destroyed are locally owned businesses by the Black community and other people of color. And so I think especially during those George Floyd protests, trying to fully, because it was so chaotic, you really have to think about where you stand in relation to all these people, and be open to listening to them and what they need and what they feel, while still being able to, I guess, kind of understand yourself and how you fit into that picture and just what work needs to be done.
And like also going off of like with the stores being looted, and especially a lot of like people of color and like their stores and small businesses getting destroyed, I just had a hard time trying to understand, or like, because like Maya was saying, like there's a lot of different groups that participated in this, which I think is important to understand. But also I'm trying to think about like these people who are already economically disadvantaged. Are you even put back or set back even more?
Exactly.
And I think that's very important. I think that kind of goes along with like a lot of like white performative like activism. Yeah, because we have to like people have to think about like what their actions truly, how is the outcome, like what the consequences are not gonna be, not for them, but like for the people that they're like trying to help, and like seeing beyond that and not just like their gut instinct, but like take into consideration of the people you're trying to help. I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely, because, you know, for my entire business district was destroyed in my neighborhood. Every single shop, restaurant, everything was smashed out or set on fire. And while I fully do agree with the sentiment that human lives are way more important than those buildings, those buildings still build people's lives. And why I don't care about Target as a corporation, as a company. I care about the jobs that Target provided to all the people of color in the neighborhood. I care about the food that they were able to access. I care about their businesses and their livelihoods. And I think part of solidarity, as Sam was mentioning, is thinking about the long-term consequences of the things you're doing to try to help those communities. So, you know, I saw like some posts on Instagram saying, you know, violence is not smashing buildings, violence is not, you know, setting things on fire, violence is poverty, violence is no health care, violence is things like that. And I think a lot of those actions, like destroying those businesses, will lead to poverty, will lead to no health care. And so I think thinking in the long term is so important. And because like those, you know, because my whole business district was destroyed, it was a total food desert, and people had a really hard time finding food. Like, unfortunately, my family has a car, but my mom still had to drive out of the Twin Cities to actually find a place to get groceries for us.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard, I guess, line to draw. Like, where do you stop? Because I kind of disagree with some of the things you said, because I feel like when it comes to like structural racism, if we just say like, oh, like we know this is a small business by Black people, or like, you know, like some signs on State Street where like restaurants say like Black Lives Matter, just to like, I guess, be escaped from the way. So I feel like there's, I guess, hard lines to draw, but at the same time, I definitely think for like corporations like Target or like Francesca or like whatever that is being looted, there's like bigger meanings behind it than like these 5 individuals who have to like lose their job for a month because of this protest. And I also think since George Floyd's one of the only protests that have drawn like international or like national attention for such a long time, it is so important for us to like remember that there's bigger meanings behind it rather than just like the 100 people were affected.
And like going off of that, like it's also like we could never put ourselves in like their shoes. We have no idea what they're going through and stuff like that. So I think like keeping that in mind, and like with the violent protest, like I do think like it was necessary and stuff like that. But I think just you always, I think it's important, like with how like my parents raised me, and like you always, even no matter like what side you're on, like you always need to double check yourself and like be open to like these other ideas and other opinions. And like if you don't agree from it with what the person's saying, like you also can use that to your advantage to learn more about what you believe in, and like how you can help strengthen that too as well.
Yeah, definitely. And like, okay, so in connection to the rest of the question, like what's the difference between solidarity and unity in love and friendship?
Yeah, so I think like thinking about, we talked about this in like our discussion group, the difference between solidarity and unity. I kind of think of like solidarity as like long term, and like unity is like isn't long term. I'm trying to think of like what I was saying, but do you want to go off a little? Or
I remember I had Googled the difference between solidarity and unity.
I have some notes too.
And I found a Quora thread about
core
it.
thread.
Yes,
Wow.
Cora coming through. So someone says that the difference between unity and solidarity is that unity is oneness, the state or fact of being one undivided entity, while solidarity is willingness to give psychological and or material support when another person is in a difficult position or needs affection. So they mentioned that unity in the end isn't democratic, it's actually fascist because or especially if it requires uniting around oppressive or inequitable or unjust positions, whereas solidarity is providing support and the possibility for a common cause without requiring the relinquishment of differing interests. It expands the discussion, the process, and the possibilities. So in class, I was kind of mentioning, it reminds me of that visual of the difference between equity and equality, where there's, there are like three people at a baseball game and they're out behind the fence in the outfield and they're all different heights, and equality is where they all are standing on the same size box, and so some of them can't see over the fence still, whereas equity is each box is catered to the size of the person so they can all see it. And then our professor said if he were to tweak one thing from that picture, he would take the fence away in general.
Yeah.
So.
I remember what I was gonna say. So from the Freedom Inc. podcast that we listened to, one of the kind of like key things that I think help define solidarity is like being there before a group is in a crisis or faces a crisis.
Yes.
And I think that's super important. Like, and knowing like what people need before like they freak out, and like just being there before it even happens and stuff. So I think that's what solidarity is like being there for people before the crisis happens. And I think unity is like kind of what happens after the crisis happens. For example, like the murder of George Floyd, like that was unity after the crisis, like after the crisis had already happened. Like we need to be there before that. And I think that also kind of goes along with like solidarity has to be long term. It can't just be like, oh, because this happened, like we need to do this, and like frantic and like impulsive. Like solidarity has to be long term.
Yeah, I also think that kind of goes into like the idea of performative activism. I also think like another thing that's, I guess, not an academic word, but like reactional activism. So like people only go on the street when things happen, and like now it's December that like there's really barely any protests in Madison specifically, and the ones that exist only like have like 100 people supporting them. So I kind of just feel like a lot of people show up only when things are getting so much media attention, even though like they haven't really supported the cause like financially, emotionally, or like have really educated themselves in that way. So just like having these repetitive reactional activism is also like very harmful, I think, because people think, oh, like I'm doing so much because every time something happens I'm like donating $5 to these campaigns, but at the same time the reason that it keep happening is because we keep losing attention and we keep losing people.
I think an important question to ask ourselves is like, as allies, like how many times is this going to happen until like we become like completely immune to, and we just react like we don't even think about it, like that, like it just becomes like a normal thing. Like how many times is that going to take, and like what's going to be the thing that makes it into a long-term solidarity thing. And I also don't know, given like being coupled with the global pandemic of COVID-19, like a lot of people have say like, oh, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. Like that kind of bothers me a little bit. I mean, not a little bit, a lot, because I think it just kind of also talks about our privilege and like how do we navigate that but like while also being aware like we are going through a global pandemic.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they think of normal, they want the simplicity of it all and to be ignorant, not recognize all the problems that we have right now that we need to be working on constantly. And again, that's a really privileged place to be, is just want to ignore it all and pretend like it doesn't happen because it doesn't affect you. But the solidarity, as we were all talking about, comes from actually building those long-lasting connections with the people who are struggling right now, you know, actually getting to know them and what they personally need as individuals is so important to show that you are there to build a long-lasting connection and relationship with them, and that you're not just going to show up when they're already having a crisis. Kind of like, you know, ideally your parent shouldn't just only show up for you if you're having a crisis, you know, that a lot of people would see that as abuse and neglect, and it is, you know, your parent should be there for you no matter what. And so I think that's the same with solidarity, is we need to show that we are there for these people no matter what, and we care about them as humans and their desires and needs, and, you know, we're not gonna just leave them to deal with their own pain on their own.
Yeah, I definitely think I really liked your analogy with like parents, because I feel like a lot of times we think of friendship as, or like short-term friendship as solidarity, because that's like not how it works. Especially like being in Madison, I think there's so many times where being the only person of color in the room and people feel like they have this sense of solidarity because of their like they're doing so well, because like wow, like look at us having like one Asian friend.
Yeah, we're like oh my god, like Joe. Do you guys watch The Bachelorette?
No. I don't.
Okay, never mind. Well, I mean, like I've been like binging it a little bit, but like they were talking about that, and like Joe was like just never got any screen time, but he was just there to like be diverse.
They always have
there's always just like one or two Asian guys on there, and I'm like always like, come on.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and that can tie into like that the idea that Asian men are undesirable, and and there's something about them that's emasculated.
Yeah. I do have one more question, or like kind of thought about like this question. Do you think like when we like are trying to reach solidarity, do you think they like there should be like feelings or like friendship and like love and stuff, or do you think it could also work in the absence of that, or like which one is better?
I definitely think it's better when there's friendship and love built before solidarity, but I also think it's absolutely possible, and like everybody should have solidarity even if they don't have personal love and relationship for those people. Because I like before coming to Wisconsin, I really didn't understand the fact like some people actually like know 0 people of color in their life, and I found out like some people who live in northern Wisconsin, like they genuinely like have never met a person of color before coming to Madison. And I feel like a lot of times for those people, it's way harder for them to like build these love and relationships, because there's just like no possibility because of the environment they came from. So I feel like it's good to like educate yourself and learn and become in solidarity with groups that are marginalized or oppressed in the system without necessarily like needing love or friendship
or for like each other and stuff. Yeah. I remember reading, I forgot what the reading was.
So many readings.
I know, there's so many, a lot of dense theory. But you know, like we're referencing all of these. But they were talking, it was like the idea of like creating like solidarity or like a social political movement off of like love or anger. And I talked about how like there's like 2 like polar groups, and like how do you bring those together? Well, you can find like a common ground, and for like example in like this paper they talked about how like the common ground is like both groups have immense love for family connections and being a family and stuff, so like you can build something off of that even if like they don't have a friendship or love like with each other. Which I thought that was like super powerful and super cool, and like something I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, I brought that up in our discussion because I think about that so much, because I see these people who hold morals and values that are so different from mine, and a lot of them oppress me as an individual in my existence. But I always try to tell myself that in the end, we're all human, and I need to at least show like basic respect for every human being. I need to somehow be able to show them love in some form, especially because I'm questioning this right now, but I want to become a doctor, and I wanted to be a doctor since I was 5, and I think as a doctor it's really important to have love for everyone to some degree and be able to recognize the humanity in everyone. So finding that common ground, I always think about the fact that a lot of people who are more conservative and Republican still really do value their family connections, and they would literally die for their family, and I think that's really admirable. And so I think it's important to not only recognize our differences, but what we can have in common as humans and what we love and care about, even if it's really hard to see that, or you don't even want to feel like you have anything that you can relate to with these people.
Next question.
Well, last question. Okay, which jar do we want to pick from?
Wait, which one did you pick from last time?
I picked from this one.
Okay.
Middle jar?
Sure.
Middle jar? Alright, here we go. Oh, Real Fortune.
The Real Fortune says, a bold and dashing adventure
Oh my God.
is in your future.
Wait, it's the same one.
It's the same one.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's not a good fortune cookie
We
package.
should put these in fortune cookies. We should like market these.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my god, we should.
Yes.
Drinking game?
Oh!
We just started the business.
like drinking. Oh god, that would be so much.
That would be
fun.
so much fun.
And then you could
Maybe
have
we should do it.
like different
Let's
colors
start
for like
business.
different amounts of like shots you have to take.
Winter break?
Trademarking that idea.
Nobody can take it. Okay.
Oh my god. Like bringing an
feel like
Asian
we did
and like an Asian twist of like drinking games.
That would be amazing.
And making you really think.
Small business. Okay. That one we already answered.
Okay.
So. Okay, let's see.
Wait, this fortune says, the object of your desire comes closer. That's not like cruel optimism. Cruel optimism. We're never actually
That
going to
is-
reach our
that is,
object
like-
of desire.
that is very accurate. I feel like
Alright.
we should like frame it.
The last
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Frame that. How does the rise of K-pop change the beauty standards for Asian Americans or beauty standards in America?
To be honest, I don't know anything about K-pop.
Neither do I.
I don't watch it.
Yeah.
But I think there's like this idea of like being a cool Asian. I kind of witnessed, or like, okay, in like high school, like I like dyed my hair like I totally bleached the shit out of it. I like bleached it like 5 times in one night. My hair's like grown back and it's doing fine now, but it was not well. It was not well. But it was a lot of fun. And then like I dyed it like purple and like pink and stuff like that. All of a sudden I like kind of felt like I got categorized as being like a cool Asian, which is kind of like, I think a lot of the fashion trends and like videos that we see of like Asians, like they're all like obviously like super trendy and like cool and stuff, and like I think that like K-pop is like kind of fueled that a little bit, and I think it's kind of hard to be like, oh, you can either be Asian or a cool Asian. Well, like why can't I just be like
Myself.
me? Yeah,
Be Ellie Chu from Half of It.
yeah,
And she does her own thing.
I just wanted to quickly elaborate upon my comment about being more like Ellie Chu from the Half of It when it comes to being able to just be yourself as an Asian and not feel the need to be a cool Asian to be valid, because Ellie's the only Asian in the small town of Squamish in Washington, and she's alienated and kind of isolated from everyone because she is traditionally nerdy or geeky, and that's tied into her Asian identity because people see her glasses and see all these layers of clothes that she wears, and she plays an instrument and all those sorts of things. And despite the fact that people judge her for that, for not keeping up with white beauty standards and assimilating, she doesn't really care because she doesn't seek the approval of others to be satisfied with herself and her own life, which I think is really important for Asian Americans.
Yeah, and like I think that also kind of ties into like a lot of these like trends like are like white culture only take like these trends that are like cool and stuff and that they want to be a part of, but nothing else.
Yeah, also it's interesting because I find that more of my white friends watch and listen to K-pop and
Same!
than my Asian
white
friends.
people like, you definitely bullied me in middle school, and now you like K-pop. I'm like, you're funny.
Yeah, and like I think this ties into the question that we cracked open from the start about fetishization.
Yeah, I was
think
just gonna
the
say.
K-pop, trend these days has really boosted and fueled the fetishization of Asians.
Oh my God.
Within the white culture.
Yeah. Being fetishized is such like a deep-rooted like fear and like thing that I think about all the time. And I was talking to my sister about it and stuff, and like in regards to like dating and like apps and whatever. But like she didn't even like realize that, and she was like, "Wow, that must be like so scary and stuff like that." And
And the fetishization thing, like that reminds me of how, because I'm adopted and have a white family, if I go out with just my dad, if I just go out with my dad to go get dinner or something like that, I always am like subconsciously thinking, do people think that he's my sugar daddy? Do they think that I'm with him in some way? And so it's like, and that's why this is called
my dad's my sugar daddy.
You're completely gonna gloss over that. I forgot.
And like, you know, you were saying that too.
Yeah, no, I haven't really had, because I grew up in Fairbanks, Alaska. Just gonna plug that.
Fairbanks, Alaska,
Anywho, like I haven't really had that conversation with anybody else that I could like relate to. And it's like, if I bring this up with my friends, like they're gonna think that's weird, or that like I'm weird that I think about that. Like, I don't know. So I've never really thought about it. And then like when we were talking about doing this project like earlier this semester, like when Maya was talking about that, I was like, oh my god, you experienced that too? Like when I was like go on trips with my dad or like go out to dinner, like people will always be like, oh, like do you want to borrow wine, or do you like, is this one check, or like weird things like that, or people always like, my dad and I both like recognize it and acknowledge it, but like that doesn't really help because we're both like very like awkward about it and we don't know like what to do. So I always I don't know if you do this, but I always tend to like just talk about school with my dad and stuff like that, because I feel like that's kind of an obvious hint or whatever. But
just say dad, like
dad.
every
I
second.
know.
Hi, dad.
Not daddy. Dad.
Father.
My white father who has given me this very nice life.
Yes. And like I remember I went out to grab food with my brother at a restaurant in our neighborhood we were living in at the time. And it was like, it was the hub of the neighborhood, so all the kids from school would work there and hang out there and stuff. And so I had a friend who worked at that restaurant, and so when we went to pay, I was paying and stuff, and she's like, oh, is that your boyfriend? And like my brother was on the other side of the room, and I was like, that's my brother. My brother. She's like, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, whenever I'm like around another like Asian person or like sitting next to them on like the airplane, like people always assume like we're together or stuff like, has that happened to
And I think that ties into it could tie into kind of the fact that the Asian community has a greater I guess percentage of interracial marriage with white people.
I find that so interesting because our rate is so much higher than any other racial group.
Yeah.
And I guess go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I keep on getting like TikToks about like other Asian women or they're like, oh, I'm into white boys, let me just be colonized again.
Oh my god.
We love that.
Yeah, I think it definitely would tie into the model minority vibe. Just trying to like get with white people as much as we can, you know, get that money, make, you know, secure the bag with white people. And like, I do even notice on like the apps and stuff, I tend to swipe on white people.
The apps, I Tinder.
And I still swipe on Asians, but not as much. I mean, mostly if they're guys. But, you know, so I do recognize that within myself.
Okay, I feel like this is, for me, I also like tend to swipe on white people a little bit more. But I also think you don't be mad when I try to justify it.
Justify with us being stuck in UW Madison.
Okay, like I know, we're just like there's no other options. The BIPOC community is so small. Like one of my friends like has at some point probably hung out with this person, so like there's really no one. who is like a person of color and have like no previous relationship with any of my friends.
Yeah.
So UW-Madison do better.
Yeah, it reminds me of how tiny the queer community feels here.
I know,
It
that's
seems
the
as though
same thing.
every time I match with someone, like another girl on Tinder or Bumble and stuff, I find out, whether I realize it right away or I find out later, I find out that we have some sort of mutual connection
Yep.
within the queer community, and it's like we're all just dating each other, and it's like you can't get a break from it.
Yeah.
So we're all connected.
I feel like that's good that we have a close-knit community, but at the same time it's like so small.
It almost feels like you're dating your siblings or something.
Yeah, exactly.
You all
You're
have,
like,
these
you're all
mutuals,
siblings.
and
Yeah.
you also don't want to like upset your other queer friends who have dated this person you just matched with, and things
Yeah.
like that, and weird experiences and navigating that.
We forgot to mention the author's name for this article. It is Staying In by Summer Kimberly, and she talks about the concept of Asian Americans staying in, which relates to Asian American asociality that we'll explain more in the video.
It talked about how Asian Americans, like, how we like socialize and stuff, and like how like we have a performativity of like asociality, like not really going in or feeling like we can, and like stuff like that. I very much feel that way. I'm like kind of a little bit more of an introvert, and like I feel like I would rather like stay in and like watch a movie, chill with friends, like play a game, and like I think that's been very hard for me to kind of figure out like how to navigate here at Madison, because I honestly did not realize how big of a party school it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Wow. Yeah. So like one of my roommate parties a lot, and she has people over. And sometimes I just like sit upstairs and like I just really don't want to come down right now because like I don't feel comfortable with like all the white people making jokes. But at the same time, I know like it's so frowned upon to like not party here at Madison specifically. So I feel like as Asian Americans, when we already have the stereotypes of like, oh, like they're just nerds, they don't really party, they don't hang out. Like even if the group doesn't make me feel super comfortable, like a lot of times I still choose to party or like choose to go out just to like present myself in a certain way.
I think a lot of people, non-Asian people, mistake the asociality with anti-sociality and like us not wanting to see people in general. And it's like, at least for me personally, I really do enjoy being around people and building connections and doing stuff, but I don't always feel the most motivated to go out and be in like big groups. And I don't personally really drink, and so but I get insecure about that because I think people are judging me for not drinking and thinking, oh, that's just because she's Asian. Things like that. And it's like, so then there's kind of the peer pressure, and then I wonder whether or not I should like start drinking a little bit just to kind of fit in more. And
I always kind of think like when I do, like if I'm like on the fence about going out or staying in, and like when I do go out, I always kind of think, okay, like I'm giving myself this chance like to go meet people, like I'm doing this for myself. But then also there's like the other side of like staying in, like you're also doing that for yourself. And I think another kind of like epiphany that I had, or like during this class about myself, is that like when I was like imagining college and coming to college, like I was very excited to be like in a totally like new environment, meet people, and like try to like put myself like out there a little bit more, being a little bit more like extroverted and go out and meet people and like put in that effort. But like I feel like when I came here, like I didn't realize like A, like how big of a party school it was, B, how the lack of diversity and how that would really affect me. And like I kind of feel like I got like kind of at the beginning like wasn't able to like do that, like what I wanted to do for myself, just because I was very overwhelmed with it and stuff. So now I kind of feel like I'm on like the wrong foot with like a lot of things, and I feel like I can't do that as much anymore because I'm like already kind of like settled in here and settled into like the culture and stuff.
Yeah, definitely think like UW-Madison like first semester is so important here, because like if you don't party first semester, you're like done, like you don't have your group. So I feel like the pressure to go out and like now staying in is definitely like really huge here. And I also think it's so interesting that you said like staying in is also for yourself. So like think about it, like we're like treating ourselves rather than like avoiding going out. It's also like a good way to frame it.
Yeah. I noticed that, like, sometimes I post stuff on, like, my Snapchat story and all that from, like, my outings to try to make myself feel as though I do enough. I go out enough and do enough for other people to, like, not associate with me with that stereotypical Asian staying in thing. To prove somehow that I'm like actually doing stuff with my life.
Yeah. It's always proving.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Trying to prove that we're not what people want us to be.
Yeah, or assume us to be, and there are just a lot of tiny little things like that that I've been recognizing is attached to my, like, just the affect of being Asian, especially at a predominantly white institution. You know, I never would have really understood why I do what I do until this class.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in for this very eventful mukbang where a whole bunch of Asians just talk about their feelings.
Yes.
Yeah, let us know if you have more questions. Blow us up.
Part of this project is called a public feelings project. So like part of it is like we have to put it out there in public for others to see and hear. And if you feel like anything that we say or like relates to you or relates to anybody else that you might know or it might be beneficial to them, like share it, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, like, share your story with us. We would love to
Yeah,
hear them.
Yeah, so just like
Cause like, yeah.
comment, like, subscribe, smash that like button,
'Cause, like,
smash it.
I know like talking about these things is scary and like stuff like that, but like honestly, like after talking to both of you and having this class, like it's been very, very beneficial. So yeah. Feelings. We love them.
We love feelings.
Yeah, we love feelings.
Always feeling.
Well,
Stay feeling. All right.
All right.
All right.
bye.
Bye.